I want to take a moment before we get into like more logistics and the exact topics we'll learn. I wanted to go and talk a little bit about the meta concepts that you should be learning throughout this course, and basically what we hope to teach you throughout the entirety of the course. So firstly, we want to teach you guys how to think adversarially about computer systems. So it's not really enough to just know about attacks or know how to defend against those attacks. A really key aspect in security is being able to think like an attacker. And that's basically like a key part of defending the system is being able to look at it like an attacker would. So that's one skill that we're going to really try to give you guys. And in fact, 2 out of our 3 projects, you'll just be attacking systems in various ways. So you will learn a good amount of adversarial art during this course. Additionally, we want to help you guys assess threats for their significance. So kind of as Fran mentioned, a lot of times in security, there's this big trade-off between, do I pay all this money for this fancy security? Do I spend all this computational cost on this fancy cryptography? And so one thing we want to teach you guys is how to look at your threat model, figure out what type of security do I need, and implement that such that you don't waste money or you don't waste resources. And yeah, so that's one of the skills that you'll hopefully learn throughout this course. And then kind of on the flip side of thinking adversarially, we want to teach you guys how to build programs and systems with robust security properties. So the second project, so one of the 3 projects, you'll just be building an entire system. So instead of attacking, you'll be designing and implementing a system and learning how to actually design something that's secure. And we also want to teach you all how to gauge the protections and limitations provided by today's technology. So just better understanding, your web browser or your phone, what's leaking when you use those things and what types of threats might you experience in everyday life. And then, of course, in kind of thinking adversarially, we'll talk about some real world attacks, and you'll also be able to do some of those real world attacks.
Okay, I think this is me, yeah. So there are 3 prerequisites for this class. I know some people are not from Berkeley, so let's just go over what they actually are, instead of just like numbers. So the first one is kind of a soft prerequisite, it's 61B. This is just to make sure you've taken like any CS class before, because we do have a second project that asks you to design a system that defends against a whole bunch of attacks. It's kind of a big project. Usually a solution is around 500 to 1,000 lines of code. So by taking 61B, you would probably have had some experience with working with larger code bases. So a bit more than just like one Python function with like 5 lines or something like that. So again, this is sort of a soft requirement. If you don't have it, don't worry too much. You might have to take a bit more time on project 2 to get used to like working with such a big code base. But again, it should be okay. Okay, the next slide is 61C. So this is the scariest one. This is actually a hard prerequisite, and people are always scared about this one. This one is very relevant in the first 2 weeks of the course. I think in the summer it's going to just be around the first week or so. And then after that, you don't have to ever worry about it again. So in the first week of the course, we're going to be going over very low level stuff like how do you attack a vulnerable C program. And to do that, you have to know how to program in C and like what does the memory layout in C look like. So there's sort of like a couple miscellaneous topics from 61C you should know. You should definitely know the C memory layout. It would be really good if you know how to represent numbers in hex and binary. It's very good if you know how a function is called on the stack. If any of this sounds familiar and you don't remember it too well, there is like a review lecture that I think I put together. So it's on the website now. It's like lectures/0 or something. There's a link. So if you go there, you can just like review any sections that you might not be familiar with. So hopefully that helps out if you haven't taken 61C or you don't remember it all too well. And remember, again, after the first 2 weeks, you don't have to worry about this anymore. So that's nice. Okay, and the last one is, again, kind of a soft prerequisite. So CS70. Again, this one is kind of scary because everyone is like super scary. Everyone is very scared of CS70 at Berkeley. So in reality, there's not too much you have to know for CS70. It's very good if you know modular arithmetic or like some basic set notation, but it's definitely nowhere near the level of detail that they cover in 70. So mostly this is only relevant in the crypto unit, which is, I would say, weeks 2 to 3. And again, after that and before that, you really don't need CS70 at all. So because we don't really use that much CS70 at all, this is probably like the lowest priority prereq. We'll do our best to try to review any prerequisite material inside lecture. And if there's anything we don't go over and you're not sure, feel free to ask. Okay, any questions about the prerequisites? Hopefully one of us is monitoring the chat for questions. There's a lot of love for Nick Weaver, who does teach this class in the fall. So yeah, shout out to Nick Weaver. Okay, next slide, Ryan. Yeah, so there were some questions in the form that hopefully everyone filled out. So I think throughout this lecture, we are going to cover some of the questions that people ask so we can answer them. A lot of people ask whether you need to know a coding language for this class. Not really. I would say it's good if you know C and Python, but there's really no big involved project ever that requires C or Python. So project one is in C, but you don't have to write lots of C code at all. The solutions are like maybe 1 or 2 lines each, but they take a lot of work to come up with. So if you do understand C and Python, that's great. And we will write like some pseudocode in Python and stuff. So it is recommended if you know them, but it's also not like the end of the world if you don't know them. And as I said before, project 2 is a very big project. It's like 500 to 1,000 lines of code. Project 2 is written in Go, and we don't expect you to know Go as a prerequisite, but hopefully you should be able to like kind of pick it up on your own as you go. So there won't be any lectures on like how do you program in Go. So if you feel like maybe that's not something you're too comfortable with, you can always like start a bit early and start like going over some basic Go tutorials on the internet. I think there's a lot of good ones that we've linked for you. Okay, I think that's about it for prerequisites. I think we're going to toss it back to Ryan.
Cool. So the online course format is a little strange. It's something that we had a little bit of experience with in spring, but as we do it like full on in summer, I just want to encourage you guys to still try to engage as much as possible. You have a team of very passionate teachers and both your instructors and your TAs who are here to help you out and make sure that you learn the course material as well as possible. So as strange as it can be online, I would really encourage you to come to office hours, come to section, and try to be a part of that as much as possible. Kind of in line with that, we're going to be doing some things that are probably new this semester. So feedback is super valuable. So we have on the course website /feedback, there's a form that you can fill out. We'll be viewing it every once in a while, in addition to like a mid-semester like feedback form we'll send out. And just if you ever have issues with anything we're doing, just put feedback there. We just want to best accommodate all you guys as we make some of these changes. And yeah, participate in Piazza. Usually, there are lots of questions on Piazza, so you'll learn a lot of stuff beyond lectures and discussions by being active on there. And if you do have questions for the instructors or just for the staff in general, use Piazza, but just make the post private. Yeah, we probably won't be responding super quickly to email or anything. Cool. So in terms of course structure, so I talked a little bit about meta, concepts that you'll be learning. So here are the specific modules we'll be going over. So for the first few lectures, we'll be doing an introduction to security. We'll talk about why security matters, some philosophy behind security. And then in the next week or so of the course, we'll talk about memory safety, which is basically, how does our operating system, how do we store data, how do we represent data in our OS, and what types of vulnerabilities can occur as a result of that. So a lot of the vulnerabilities we'll be seeing in memory safety portion of the course are vulnerabilities that you might accidentally code when writing C code or something like that. So that's the first part of the course. Then we'll move into cryptography. And cryptography deals with a lot of different things, but we'll be mainly focused on secure communication. So we'll be looking at two parties and thinking, okay, if we want Alice and Bob to talk to each other, how can they talk to each other in such a way that their communications stay private, they aren't tampered with, and they can be sure that the communications are actually coming from each other. And then after that, we'll move into network security. So maybe something like, if I'm on a public Wi-Fi hotspot, what can an attacker do and how do I defend myself? And then after that, we'll pivot into web security, which is, what type of threats exist when I'm using the web and on my web browser. And then we'll finish off with some miscellaneous topics. So this will kind of mix some of, all these modules together. So we'll have stuff like blockchain, Bitcoin, Tor networking, and also contact tracing. And we may have a few other topics thrown in there if we have time. Any questions on course structure? Okay. Cool. And outside of homeworks and projects, so the course structure, there's lectures, we'll have discussions, office hours, and exams. So we'll give a little bit of detail on those now. So lectures, because we have to be asynchronous, we have people in different time zones and not everything matches up. All our lectures are going to be, or most of them will be pre-recorded And we're going to split them into small chunks, so like maybe 6 to 7 minute videos with short questions at the end to like make sure you're following along well enough. And almost all the lectures should be like that. We may have a few lectures that are live, but you can expect most of them to be pre-recorded. And we'll, since Peyton and I don't expect to be able to teach this class any better than Raluca and David, so we'll be reusing a lot of the webcasts from spring 2020. And we'll have a set lecture time. So lectures will be released for the whole week, so you can do them whenever you want. But we'll have a set lecture time where Perrin or myself will be on a Zoom call. So if you have questions about the lecture, you can switch over to that Zoom call and ask us questions. So in being asynchronous, we still want to be able to support people asking questions during the lecture and that type of stuff. Yeah. Any questions on lecture format? Okay, and the first few lectures are up. So maybe after this, if you want to just go take a look at them, you can kind of see how that's laid out. Yeah, so I just mentioned this. The live lecture time will be 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And yeah, Perrin and myself will be on a call to answer any questions that you may have. And you can kind of treat it as an extra office hours. Okay, discussions will start this Wednesday. And we have 3 options for discussions. So we'll have a normal synchronous section over Zoom. So, there's a scheduled time that everyone goes at. This is probably what most of you were used to in spring. You'll get the chance in the synchronous section to actually interact with your TA and talk with other students and that type of stuff. So if you can make the synchronous section, I would recommend it. It's a good opportunity to kind of think out your thought process with other people. In addition to that, we'll also have a lost section, which is just another section that's an hour longer. It goes a bit more pedantically through stuff. So if you're feeling, especially lost, it might be a good place for you to go to section to kind of catch up on stuff. And then we'll also be posting discussion worksheet recording. So, if you can't make any of those times, we'll have a recording of someone just working through the worksheet that you can go through. Any questions on discussion? Okay. And in terms of discussion schedule, you can look on the course website for that. We haven't published the exact which TAs will be at which hour. That should come out sometime later today or tomorrow. But the calendar is up in terms of discussion times. And we try to stagger sections and office hours out enough that everyone should have the opportunity to attend at least one section of office hours. So yeah, and one possible minor change, we might change the 7 a.m. section to 8 a.m. starting next week. For office hours, the way this will essentially work is you go to this 161.org/OH and you'll be put on a queue. You'll kind of select like what you're having issues with, and then you get put on a queue. And when a TA is available, they'll dequeue you, and then there'll be a Zoom link that you can click on. So you can click on that Zoom link, and then you'll join a meeting with the TA, and you can go over your question with them. And again, we tried to stagger out office hours so everyone has at least some chance to be there. And during project weeks, we'll probably add extra office hours just because stuff can get pretty hectic with the projects. Okay. Any questions on office hours?
Okay, is this also me? I think it is.
Yeah.
One more question is, when is the first homework due? So I think we're gonna go over this like right now. So there are 3 projects, as we mentioned before. There's 7 homeworks, which is very nice. It's like 1 per week. There's 1 midterm and there's 1 final exam. So that's your whole grade. Okay, so let's just go over these in a bit more detail. The homeworks, there are 7, as I mentioned, it's 1 per week. Each one is due Sunday night at 11:59 Pacific time. So it's it's like very consistent, always 11:59. We're not gonna accept late homeworks because we wanna release solutions as soon as possible, but you will get 1 drop. So if something comes up, if one of the weeks is kind of weird, something comes up, we'll drop your lowest score. And for projects, we also understand that it's kind of a crazy time for everyone. So we will have 3 project slip days, which means that out of the 3 projects, you can submit you can submit like in total up to 3 days late, if that makes sense. So maybe you want to submit project 1 day late, and then project 2 1 day late, and then project 3 1 day late. Maybe project 3 is like a very bad time for you and you have to submit project 3 3 days late, that's fine. But in total, you have 3 days of wiggle room there. And if you're out of slip days, then we're going to start deducting points because we do need to grade your projects eventually. So all this will be calculated for you. So we'll just, if you like use too many slip days, we'll calculate what combination gives you the highest score. Okay, and if there's any extenuating circumstances, so something really bad comes up, again, we understand these are kind of crazy times for everyone. So if something really serious comes up and you really need to talk to us about possibly like working out a different plan for this course, there is a form on the website that you can fill out. Okay, let's stop for questions. I think we saw a couple. So again, homeworks are due every Sunday, 11:59 p.m. I think that's the only question, I guess. Is there anything else? Okay, so the midterms and the finals, these were kind of hard to work out. So is it the next slide? Yeah, okay. So we learned, I would say maybe a week, maybe half a week ago that according to like central campus, so like administration, we are allowed to proctor the exam. So I'll go over that in just a bit. We do know that the midterm and the final are going to be synchronous. So we expect everyone to be able to take them at the same time. According to the form you filled out, these are the most popular times. So the midterm is going to be 4 to 6 Pacific time, and the final is going to be 4 to 7 Pacific time. If you do need DSP accommodations, so this is the disabled students program. If you need extra time on exams or a special like private environment or something like that, just let us know and we can work that out. Okay, so as I mentioned before, okay, so hopefully everyone is able to take the exam at 4 p.m. Pacific time, but we do understand people are in different time zones and stuff, and that might not be possible for everyone. So if you absolutely cannot make that time, there's one alternate time for you, and that is 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. for the midterm and 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. for the final. So this was just based on the results. Out of what we did was we took everyone's preferences. I took out everyone who could make the 4 p.m. time, and then out of the people who were left, this was the most popular time. And even after removing these two, there were some people who absolutely cannot make either time. So if you fall into that category, you should probably message us on Piazza, and we can discuss an alternate exam time for you. And because we do want to keep exams secure, right? Because like after the first 2 exam times, exams might start leaking and stuff, and people might start discussing solutions. And there's not a great way for us to like prevent that. So if you do take one of the very late exams and the alternative exams times, we might ask you to come in for a very short oral exam just to make sure you weren't, cheating or anything like that. But it's going to be very low pressure, right? It's not like a huge exam or anything. We just want to come in. We just want you to come in on a call and just, ask a couple questions to make sure you know what's going on. Okay. Questions on the exam policy and the times? I guess not. Okay. So as I sort of mentioned before, we only learned maybe half a week or a week ago that we are allowed to proctor. And I talked to Nick Weaver, who is the instructor for the fall, and I asked, what do you plan to do for the fall? And his response was almost verbatim, hell yes, we should proctor. So I was like, okay, whatever you say. So we will be proctoring the exams over video. So for both exams, as you take the exam, you should have some sort of video feed, hopefully using a smartphone, which I believe almost everyone said they have one. So using your smartphone, you should be able to record your computer screen and also an answer sheet that you're going to print out. So if you don't have a printer, it's also okay if you just write out the answer sheet by hand, that's fine too. But we do expect you to be able to see your computer screen and your answer sheet for the entire exam. So for some reason, campus said that for the midterm, we should not use Zoom. So I guess we're not going to do that. So for the midterm, you'll just record this video yourself offline. And then after the exam is over, you'll upload it for us. And then for the final, they said we should use Zoom. So I guess we'll just use Zoom and join a Zoom meeting. So you'll join a Zoom meeting during the exam, and then a TA will watch you as you take the exam. So we do understand that not everyone is comfortable doing this. So there might be some privacy concerns. Maybe you don't have the necessary equipment to do this, and that's totally fine. So if that's one of you, you can reach out to us and we can discuss alternatives. Again, this is an alternative that Nick Weaver really likes to use, so we'll probably use it. And that is that we'll ask you to take an additional verbal exam. So again, this is a pretty low stress exam. We just want to ask you to come in, maybe like walk through 1 or 2 questions for us to make sure you weren't getting answers from somewhere you weren't supposed to. Okay, questions on exam proctoring. There's a couple. So someone asked, what happens if your internet is unstable? We understand not everyone has great internet. Mine is not that great either. So if your internet does kind of like go in and out, we understand it's going to be like sort of best effort. So as long as you're making an honest attempt, we're not going to like go after you just because your internet is bad or anything like that. If your internet if you think your internet is so bad that it can't even sustain like 2 hours of exam and it's going to just drop out for minutes and minutes at a time, for the final, maybe you can just record a video offline, but we can talk about this after the meeting as well. Someone asked if the exam is open book. It's kind of hard for us to administer this, so this was also something we talked about. So we talked about, is it possible to have the exam open internet? And the conclusion was probably no, because then we'd have to watch all of your screens and see, are you just Googling Wikipedia, or are you just looking for, or are you like chatting with a friend? And that's really, really hard for us to proctor. So probably the exam's not going to be open internet, so you can't use the internet. We do want to let you have like some cheat sheets. So probably what's going to happen is we're going to let you have some handwritten cheat sheets. So those are very easy for us to proctor because you can just have them to the side and just consult them. So you can have unlimited handwritten cheat sheets. I'm not sure what we want to do about writing out things with an iPad. I think if you can get the setup correct, we might be able to discuss it, because I do know some people like using iPads. So
we'll probably
if you can get the setup,
yeah,
we'll talk about that later. But probably if you can get the setup into a state where it's like, oh, it's very obvious for us to proctor, and we can see that you're being honest, I think it's fine. But we can talk about that later. Good question, though. Any other questions on the exam? So someone asked, so someone asked, will we be recording? Oh, sorry.
So
yeah, we'll
you'll
be recording,
mainly be using like a smartphone or something like that.
Yeah.
So not just recording your screen, but using a camera to record, like, yeah, your actual hands writing on the paper and that type of stuff.
Yeah, so probably it'll just be one camera behind you, and then it records both the paper beneath you and then also your computer screen. Yeah, someone asked if it's unlimited cheat sheets. It is. Ideally, it should be handwritten because it's very easy for us to proctor, right? We can just like look at a stack of paper next to you. Question, does this cam follow you to the bathroom? For very obvious reasons, the answer is no. If you do need to take a bathroom break, as long as you leave your camera running, you can just go use the bathroom really quickly. And we did talk about how that's like, I mean, you can probably go and like talk to your neighbor about the exam or something like that. So if that does happen, I mean, there's very little we can do about it, I suppose, right? Because we talked about this with Nick earlier today, and the conclusion was that in a live exam, you can also say, I have to use the bathroom, and run out and talk to someone else. And there's very little we can do about that. So if you do have to use the bathroom, we understand. Try not to if you can. Try to like go before and stuff like that. But if you do have to go, we're not going to ask you to like video that or anything. Okay, other questions on exam proctoring? There will be a lot more details coming about this as soon as we work them out. But this is like a directive we got maybe half a week ago. So this is what we have so far. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, that's it for exams. I think there is one more slide here because some people asked us, what about the security concerns about Zoom? And that is a pretty valid question to ask. You got us there. And it is true that there are more secure alternatives, but unfortunately, administration told us to use Zoom, and administration paid for our Zoom. So that's what we have to use. Okay, is the next slide also me? I think this is Ryan. But I get it wrong.
It doesn't matter. So
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we'll be mainly using like 3 things for the course. So, or I guess 4 if you count Zoom. We'll have our course website where we'll post all of our lectures, all the scheduling stuff, all of, like additional optional readings you can do. The course notes will be there. We'll be using Gradescopes for assignments. So for homeworks, projects, and exams, everything's submitted through Gradescope. And here's the entry code. We'll also have it in the Piazza post. And then we'll be using Piazza for like answering most questions in class and for announcements. And then Zoom for, sections, office hours, and exams. So those are the main things that you need to have set up for the course. Any logistical questions on that? Okay. And so I'll briefly talk about intellectual honesty. So to start this off, we just have a picture of Nick Weaver. So, so he's a professor. He teaches it usually in the fall, teaches 161 in the fall. And he's very well known for not being fond of cheaters. So every summer he volunteers his services to deal with anybody who's caught cheating. So I'll just go over kind of some of that policy. So in this class, we view anyone who would cheat as a sort of attacker, just because you're harming other students and their grade outcomes. And hopefully you guys all know what cheating is, but it's sharing code on homeworks or projects or talking on midterms and finals. If there's any ambiguity about what is cheating and what is collaboration, I would recommend looking at the course policies or talking to us. And we do assume that most of you guys, any people who would think about cheating are rational in the sense that, you know, if the expected cost of cheating is too high, you aren't going to do it. So as course staff, we're going to try to make it the expected cost of cheating very high in terms of none of you guys will want to do it, just so that we can have a level playing field for everyone taking the course. So we have a lot of different tools that we use to scan work and to find cheating. And every semester we catch a fair number of people. And at the very minimum, if we catch you, you'll get negative points. But at the worst, you can fail the course and sometimes worse. So every semester we catch a surprising number of people, but I would just encourage you all not to cheat because yeah, it can have some dire consequences. So for the question, what we'll be talking about the security downfalls of Zoom. So we had a slide earlier. The campus directive is like Zoom is basically approved for us to proctor on. And recently Zoom actually upgraded the cipher block mode they use to something that's a little bit more secure. So the security concerns that most people have for Zoom, they aren't as bad as they were a few months ago. But we basically Zoom is our only option for proctoring at this point. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Yep. And you'll learn maybe why you won't have to worry about it as much later in the course. Okay, and then in terms of other negative things, so we'll talk really briefly about ethics. So as I talked about earlier, this is a class where we'll teach you adversarial techniques, we'll teach you attacks, like real world attacks that you can do against systems. And so like out of necessity to learn security, you need to learn how to think and how to be an attacker. But at the same time, a lot of this is, you know, don't do this at home type stuff. So we're going to give you these nice VMs, these nice environments for you to do these attacks in. But many of these are very highly, many of these things we'll teach you are highly illegal. And so yeah, the big thing I would say is if you're ever unsure about whether, you know, any of the things you learn in this class, whether you can take them outside of the context of the class, the big key is consent. So it's fine to break your own stuff, but if you're ever messing, you know, with anything else, so for instance, you know, if you're messing with a router or something like that, you need to make sure that you have the permission of everyone who happens to use that router and the person who owns the router. And if there's any ambiguity, I just wouldn't do it. It's very criminal and unethical, and the consequences are surprisingly harsh for cybercrime. So I would just recommend not doing it. But yeah, I would say big key is consent. Okay, here's some random pictures from Weaver.
Yeah, it's always Weaver.
Okay, and then, so for stress management and mental health, we just want to kind of end on this note. As a staff, we're going to try not to overstress you as much as we can. We're going to try to, you know, even stuff out, make sure there's enough gaps in between assignments and stuff. But this is, you know, a full semester course that's been crunched into, you know, half the time. So there's going to be a lot to cover. There will constantly be assignments out for the course. So just be prepared that there is a lot. And I really encourage you guys to try to keep up with content, not fall too far behind, because that will definitely lead to a lot of stress. So if you feel overwhelmed, you're more than welcome. Like, please reach out to us. We want to help you as much as possible. And also for, you know, maybe non-academic help, there's also the university health services. So I'd recommend going to them. And yeah, so these are very hard times. They're very weird times. And like as staff, we recognize that. And we want to do the best to accommodate all of you guys. So just please communicate with us and let us know how you are doing so we can best teach you the material without you guys getting too stressed. So yeah, I think that's all we have to cover. Do people have questions?
We can probably hang around until 6 questions, but that's all the actual material for this first lecture. There are, just so you know, there are, I think, 2 or 3 videos from Professor Wagner on like introduction to security, why is security important, all that stuff. So if you've attended, you don't need to watch, I think, the first 2 videos of the first lecture, but you will need to watch the rest of that. So just so you know. And, but that is it for this live lecture. So thanks everyone for coming. I think we got like 40 or 50 people, which is more than I expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there are any questions, I will stick around. Yeah.